All right. All right, my friends, this is the Take What You Need podcast, and this is a unscripted, unplanned conversation between two individuals, myself, Shawn McQueen, and my guest today is Michael Plank. And the intention and premise of the whole idea is for you, the listener, and us involved in the conversation to take whatever we need from the conversation. We're going to go a plethora of places, open-ended, and the goal being take what you need. So I'll be half the discussion today. My name is Shawn McQueen. I'm 37 years old. I live in upstate New York. I am a small business owner. I'm a veteran and a dog lover. I'd like to introduce you to the other half of the discussion today. Michael Plank, go ahead and introduce yourself, my man.
Michael Plank, I am also a small business owner. I am 40 years old. I am in upstate New York also, but more upstate than you. Um, and I have two kids and a dog and a cat and live in the country. We just moved to the country 5 weeks ago.
Okay. Are you ready? Question number one.
Ready.
Michael, being a parent, what do you feel is something as a parent that does not get enough attention or the dues that it necessarily may be necessary, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think for me, I think about parenting as an avenue for personal growth. That's sort of like a selfish way to think about it almost. And also like I, like you, have dived really deep into personal development and self-growth and learning and lifelong learning and things like that. But parenting in particular is one of the most powerful tools that I know of for becoming a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons for it uh, is that your failures will be brought to your attention very quickly. Um, I had a I had just like a really tough day a couple months ago. We were getting ready to move, super stressful. I didn't have enough sleep. I didn't get my workout in. Like there's boxes and stuff all over the place. It was a rough day. And at the end of the day, I was putting the kids to bed. My son is 10. My daughter is going to be 5 in a couple of weeks. And like we did all our good night things, and I was reading to them, and she like snuggled up to me in the rocking chair, and she kind of had her stuffed animal, and she was snuggled to me, and she was like, looked up at me, and she was like, "I like mom better than you." And I like had to like go back and be like, well, I've been kind of like a miserable person to be around today. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course you did. Like, of course you did. And so like I was kind of proud of myself in the moment because I was just like, well, that is a really unkind things to say to somebody. And like just sort of talk through like how you don't say those sorts of things. But then like thinking about it later that night, I was like, oh yeah, man. Like you did not, to myself, like you did not bring your best to your family today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, there's just like opportunities like that all the time. Or like if I lose my patience and snap at my 10-year-old, and I can like see in his body language and his face, like him just be like crestfallen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have this opportunity to be like, oh shoot, like is that how I really want to like have this interaction go today?
Mm-hmm.
Like already tomorrow he's going to be one step away from like the amazing 10-year-old boy that I love. Like this time is so fleeting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is that how I want this to go? And then I have like a chance to either like address it in the moment or the next day. I mean, I find myself apologizing to my kids on a fairly regular basis. Like, I don't want to say it's like 8 times a day. I think I do a little better job than that. But like, but to go back to them and be like, hey man, I did not do a particularly good job when you asked me about this thing the other day. And this is where I was, and I'm trying to do better, and like here's where we're gonna go forward. But the chance to be able to work on that stuff all the time has
Hmm.
been huge for me. And I think like like it bears mentioning that I'm a pretty confident, grounded person. Um, and so in my life personally, to achieve growth, what I really value and really get a lot from uh is moments of failure. And that's not necessarily true for everybody. I know plenty of people who like are on the other end of the spectrum and really struggle with confidence, and they don't need like to feel beaten down every single day. And they should probably like try to find things that make them feel growth and maybe like focus on those things where like where their child snuggles up to them and tells them how they're the greatest person in the world. Like that's the ones that they should pay attention to, not so much the other ones. But for me, it's really helpful to pay attention to the ones where I get like checked a little bit.
Hmm. I have a couple spin-off questions based off of all the gems you just shared within there. And I think where I'll go first, if you don't mind, is where did that relationship with failure begin to become what sounds, I mean, I don't want to misspeak, it sounds healthy for you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Um, that's a great question. So I I grew up super sensitive. Um, and Bonnie Skinner, who we both know, who I'm doing therapy with for a few years, she would call it mental fitness coaching as an aside. Um, like has helped me sort of reframe that a little bit. But I mean, when I think about how sensitive I was to a child, it was like, or as a child, it was like borderline incapacitated. So I remember going on a field trip to the planetarium. I would probably would have been in like third or fourth grade, and learning that the sun was going to go into a supernova someday, and it would blow up and like wipe out the solar system, destroy all life on Earth, and all this sort of stuff. And I'm sure the video was like, this is going to happen in like millions of years. And I was so broken up about it and like anxious about it and scared about it. Like I lost sleep about it for like weeks. And like that kind of stuff would happen to me all the time. My feelings got hurt so easily. Like I was so worried about so many things. Like we live in this tiny town outside of Chicago called Woodstock, Illinois, a population of about 14,000 people. When the Gulf War was going on, like I was convinced Saddam Hussein was going to send planes over and bomb Woodstock, Illinois. Like it was not good. Like I didn't have a very good framework for recognizing, for like assessing threats and hardship against me. It was like everything is level 10.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like where I was childhood wise. We moved when I was like 16. I found martial arts. I started judo, learned, moved to a new place, could kind of like figure myself out and kind of finish out high school trying on some new identities. And through that, kind of like gained some confidence and made some choices where I was like, this is actually kind of how I want to live my life. I don't really want to live it in this sort of scared way all the time. And so that's what I did, and that worked for me. That worked for me, especially for the first couple of years. So I kind of like doubled down on it, and then that built into a really high level of confidence, and I think quite a bit of clarity for me about like the things I did not want and the things that I was not going to do, and I sort of put those aside. Um, and so that's great. But if you think about this as sort of like a pendulum, I started like way over here with a lot of anxiety and fear and lack of confidence, and then swung way over here to like I had to do a psychological evaluation at one point, and they said I had a confidence bordering on arrogance,
Mm.
and I was like, that's a bunch of bullshit. But then I was like, oh no, actually, that's probably true. Uh, and so to like get some failure, then I think like brings me back closer to the middle.
Mm. Mm. And where in that you mentioned growing a relationship with personal self-development, eventually working with the mental fitness coach.
Yeah.
Where and why did that relationship begin? Not with Bonnie yet, with working on yourself, the personal development, self-development. And what did that originally look like and how has it evolved?
I don't really remember making like making a decision about, picking up like a Tony Robbins DVD or anything like that. Like I don't really remember anything like that. But I grew up in the church. I went to seminary after I graduated college. I became an ordained pastor in Presbyterian Church USA, and kind of like a part of all of that involves a lot of like group process is sort of the terminology they use there, which is typically like regular meetings of a small group of whatever, 4 to 10 people, um, in which you can kind of like say, hey, this is this thing that I went through. This is how this is sort of experienced, and everybody else can kind of like give some feedback. Sometimes that's not done well, but when it is done well, and when you have the sort of trust established, you get some things that kind of like feel like and sound like therapy. And so you can say, hey, I had this problem with this person in my congregation. This is what they said, this is what I did. I think they were way out of line. And you have all these other people around you who are really smart and who love you and care about you, but also who trust you and see it differently than you. And they can be like, I actually think that probably you were out of line on that one. And when you have the sort of trust in the relationship that you can hear that sort of feedback, it allows you to make some shifts and to make some changes. And so encountering that, and then encountering the places where that was positive, is something that has like led me to seek that out a little bit more. So that's one piece of that. The other piece of that is I think there's not a ton of things that I'm naturally super duper gifted at. Um, but there are a couple where I am, I think, especially gifted. One is memory, but another is learning. Like I'm good at learning, and being able to sort of dive deeply into yourself is like that's a well that's never going to run dry.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's always more to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy learning. I enjoy learning about myself, and consistently when I invest in that, like it's 1 to 1. I can see the ways that my life gets better.
Mm-hmm. You, you and your wife, Lauren, how long have you guys been married?
It will be 15 years in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today.
15 years. Where did you
15
guys?
years. We met in New Mexico, actually. We were both volunteers with Presbyterian Church, and there was like an annual gathering of the volunteers. She was on the Gulf Coast, and I was in Tucson, Arizona, and we met in New Mexico.
Okay. 15 years. Share with me one, if it's a minimal or up to three things that you have found across time to keep the relationship prospering, feeling healthy,
Yeah.
loving in that realm,
Yeah.
conducive, not one-sided, not toxic, growing together. What jumps out at you?
Yeah, the number one, and Lauren says this anytime we go to a wedding and like there's a place to like write things down,
Mhm.
for the bride and groom. But number one has just been commitment. By which I mean like at the end of the day, no matter what, we choose each other.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily mean don't go to bed angry. That's something people say all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean it's always easy. That doesn't necessarily mean that like that we think each other are like on the right track in whatever project we're working on. But it's like we are still going to stay connected, and we are going to make that an intentional choice forever.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the biggest one by far. And you and I have talked about commitment in a lot of ways, in a lot of different realms, but
Mhm.
that's the biggest for sure.
Yeah.
for sure.
If I shift this next question more towards your business, how long have you owned your gym in Underwood Park?
10 years a week from today.
Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thanks, man.
Okay, that might even be due for some reflection. What if I were to ask 10 years, what's been some of the most rewarding work and things you've done and been a part of in 10 years in what you do?
Without question, it's been seeing people grow more into who they have always wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's with athletes and members who come in and work with us, or with coaches and staff who I've been able to sort of like be a part of the mentorship journey with, seeing people start one way and have sort of this sense of like who they hope to be in the future, and then see them typically they don't go right where they thought they would be in the future. They like kind of end up over here, but it ends up being better than what they imagined. But seeing that growth, I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the plan for your 10-year?
We've got a member who owns a restaurant, and we're hosting a brunch there. It'll be awesome. And we're inviting all the members, all the alumni, all the people on our newsletter lists, like anybody who's ever paid us any attention whatsoever. Like we're letting them come down.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we'll think about some probably shifts a little bit in kind of like our offerings and things like that after 10 years. We started as just like a straight up CrossFit gym.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've gotten deeper into it, and as I am no longer like 30 years old and like a garage grinder CrossFit kind of guy, but like I'm thinking more about fitness and health and longevity and lifespan in like a more holistic sense. Like we want to be able to help people do more of that stuff.
Yeah, let's go down that road. I love
Yeah,
that.
man.
Speaking of 40, what are some of the biggest differences you're noticing in your experience at 40 compared to just 10 years ago at 30?
Uh, like physically,
Mm-hmm.
recovery for sure. Like my recovery is just considerably slower than it was when I was 30. Even like this like black fingernail polish looking thing, I bashed my finger with a hammer, and that was like 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I was 30, that wouldn't have taken 6 weeks. Like that would have taken probably like 4 weeks. And when I was 20, it probably would have taken 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It just like the healing and recovering is slower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, share a little bit more about your vision shifting in terms of the holistic nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about this, you and I, a little bit. Like high intensity training is what CrossFit like brought to the table, right? In a pretty powerful way, I think, whatever, almost 25 years ago. And there's sort of an analogy that I kind of learned from Peter Attia about your sort of overall fitness. And if you imagine your overall fitness being like a pyramid, high intensity training, especially when it comes to conditioning, so less like 1 rep max efforts, things like that, but more like that sort of 8 to 20 minute muscle burn, heavy breathing sort of realm where CrossFit like really spent a lot of its time.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can make that pyramid really, really tall.
Mm-hmm.
And what comes with that is a ton of the benefits that people associate with fitness. So increased muscle mass, increased aerobic capacity, increased power output, like all these sorts of things, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wrote a blog post about this. The problem with only building a block up is it's like trying to build the tallest Lego tower you can. Like I did that with my son. We built one that was like 7 feet tall, and it lasted for 8 seconds and then it fell over.
Mm-hmm.
And when it falls over, that's what like overtraining looks like. And so that's when people start to run into injuries.
Mhm.
We've had people who train 5, 6 days a week of CrossFit and are doing like high intensity stuff. And they progress and progress and progress, and then they stall out, and then they start to regress a
Mhm.
little bit. And
Mhm.
even though they're training hard, maybe training even harder, like they start to lose capacity. They get weaker, they get slower. And so that's like the tower's collapsing
Mhm.
because they're overtraining, because they don't have the base. And like what you want with like the giant building of your fitness is for it to be like a pyramid. So you want it to be really tall for sure, but you also want it to have a really broad base so it can't fall over. And building that broad base is stuff that like you don't see with a lot of fitness influencers, you don't see with a lot of competitions, because it's super boring and super not sexy. And it's the stuff that's like walk for half an hour every day
Yeah.
and like do zone 2 cardio stuff and do mobility work, and do just super quality work, and work on your joint capacity and your joint rotation and all that stuff. Like takes a long time and doesn't have the super quick return that the high intensity stuff has, but it's the stuff that makes it so your building doesn't fall over.
Yeah.
So it's not even necessarily that like training CrossFit 5 days a week is is bad for you. But it's like if you're going to train CrossFit at a 10 out of 10, 5 days a week, you probably should do low intensity stuff, which is all that stuff that we talked about, probably a minimum of another 5 hours a week, maybe even better, like 10 hours a week, so
Yeah.
that you've got this really big foundation. And then the high intensity stuff is how you build on that foundation. But one of the things that I just didn't understand when I started, is kind of what like I knew what doing CrossFit 5 to 6 days a week for 3 years looked like, but I
Mhm.
didn't know what it looked like to do that for 10 years.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I've been thinking about that for a long time, like a year anyway, and talking about that with people like you.
Mhm.
But now starting to talk about that a little bit more with our membership.
Yeah. Do you find it as a coach? I know we're both owners, but also in the coach's hat. I mean, owner's hat too. I find it really difficult um, to know what's best for people and seeing what they perceive they want. And if I were to elaborate, when you were sharing a little bit about like the CrossFit thing and people working out 5 to 6 days a week, and when if we zoom out, do we have our, just as a curiosity, do we have our nutrition dialed in to 80 to 90%
Oh,
compliance consistently, and our body fat's in a healthy range, and we're happy, and we have our systems and structure in order in terms of there. So like home base, and then we move to like stress management, where
yeah.
the flip side to me of stress management is I, it could be, not always is, I need to come to the gym or work out 5, 6, 7 days a week to change my state, because that physical thing
Yep.
is easy to do and
Yep.
I feel better after, where it is one avenue. And that's a piece of it where, state change of stress management, not doing the work, or confronting the work, or having the hard conversations, or sitting in the uncomfortable or the muck. And then there's the stuff training wise that we're talking about, that more zone 2, more long and slow, which should feel relatively easy. Well, I could put myself into the position of our people, or a lot of our people, looking at that and being like, I'm not going to go, or that's boring, or I
Totally.
don't want to do
Totally.
that, or why
Yep.
would I pay to do that? And it's all flawed thinking. Yet you and I both know this is a health move. This isn't like you getting on doing slow, long conditioning here. And I fell into that trap too, where creating and having to create something really exciting for folks to come into, and almost like creating more of a problem. And when I was in this recovery stage of surgery, I did a lot of reading from Dan John, and I know, you picked up Easy Strength now, and one of the Dan John and Pavel, some of the best strength coaches in the world, and reading and diving deep into that work of, and I even ran an experiment. But the I'm getting off track. The premise being two sets of 5, 10 total reps at a again, not even tying it to a percent or anything, but just let your body guide you each day, like can be enough. And that could be in the realm of like a push, a pull, a bend, a squat or a unilateral, and some core work and maybe some swings. And that's one scheme. And to wrap the mind around with what we know that that could be enough blew my mind. And
Yeah.
I was like, I have to try this. And it went against all things that I, had known. And interestingly enough, again, I'll tie this back around. When I ran that experiment for about 25 days, I did essentially the same workout coming out of shoulder surgery, maybe 4 months later. And it was nothing glamorous or profound. It was, two sets of 5, single arm bench press with a really light dumbbell to start to build stability and strength back up in my arm. And I let my weak arm guide. It was maybe 10 sets of an exercise called bat wings to strengthen my rhomboids and mid back. And that was my pulling exercise because I couldn't do pull-ups with my asymmetry. I would choose a snatch grip deadlift for a little bit of hypertrophy. And it was the premise there is like, you don't lift something, like let your body talk to you, lift light, practice. And this is another concept that I think our people would really be hard pressed to wrestle with is lifting a lot lighter, where I think in the setting I always need to feel progress. So that was
Yeah.
a conflicting thought too, is you're rethinking about training in the gym as a place to practice, where what you mentioned kind of in there too is like, I need a result and I need to be chasing a result. I need a feel of something. And I think what
Yeah.
CrossFit is really good at, or a conditioning style workout in that format, is kicking your butt, making you feel like, you accomplished something, of course, which you do.
Yeah.
And
Tons of endorphins.
yeah, endorphins, and there's variety, and this is not a knock at all to that. It is the evolution of thinking of that can fit into the pie, but if it fits in a lot less, which likely as we up the age chain, it absolutely should. Um, what effect does that have on people like you and me in our business? Because a fear I would have is people come less or jump ship or exit
Yeah.
because I'm not getting what I want. However, like again, knowing like this is probably what we all need, especially like you talked about 10 years of it. I'm 12 years, and like a surgery, not blaming this. It's just a part of my story. And just interesting. So those are struggles that I've experienced that have
Totally.
really just been a conflicting part for me as a coach, as an owner, of thinking of what's best for people, and you're thinking about helping them, and all the realms. Do you encounter similar struggles?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, man, like, let me back up a little bit and say, especially if you're like watching this and listening to this, like movement is going to be better than no movement.
100%.
Like, if all you're doing is sitting at your desk and then going home and then doing high intensity exercise 5 days a week, like you could do so much worse.
100%.
So like
Yes. Yeah, we should have framed it to
all
say,
good, all
yeah,
good.
how to do what we're doing slightly better is a thought we're having.
Right, right. And I think like you and I are sort of in this sort of privileged position where we can think about this stuff all the time, and like that's our job. And not everybody wants to think about it that way, which is fine. Um, but I've started to use more language just in blog posts, in conversation, in coaching, in personal post, be like, this is a lifetime game. Like you are never done with like trying to get healthy. Like you don't win that game. This is the thing that in order to have at least what I think of as optimal health, meaning in the last few years of my life, I can still like pick up grandkids and carry my own luggage and groceries. In order to be able to do all that sort of stuff, this is a long, long game sort of scenario. Like I don't really care if I add 10 pounds to my deadlift this month. Like I want to still be able to deadlift 20 years from now. And so my hope is that being able to talk about it in that way, like allows for some more space for some patience. And if there's more space for patience, then I think there's higher tolerance for the boring stuff. Now, like time will tell. And this, I think, is where things like semi-private training and private training can sort of fit in there a little bit more with people who are interested in kind of going after that sort of stuff. Because doing a group class where you're like, hey, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to row 40 minutes at 70% of your max heart rate, 65% of your max heart rate. Like, dude, that is so boring. Like, even if you're into that sort of stuff, is boring. But being able to say like, hey, let's take some time and use the semi-private thing for the accountability of doing this work that you want to be doing, but that is a little bit more boring. I don't know. That's sort of like a rambly way to sort of like get at that, but it's a tough nut to crack, especially when you and you were one of the first people who talked about this to me, about how addictive the high intensity training can become. You and then my wife Lauren, who's such a good partner for me because like the only reason she does CrossFit is because we own a CrossFit gym. Like she's not like I'm always thinking about like health and wellness and longevity and lifespan and health span and zone 2 and all this sort of stuff. And she's like, oh, whatever, this is just a thing that we have to do. So like she brings a really great perspective, and she and then you also were like, that high intensity thing with all the endorphin kick and all that can become really addictive and not great ways.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you when you've navigated that with people?
It's never one, never one way. The folks who trust you and know and have, I think, know your who you are and your intentions, in my experience, through effective communication with them and clear communication, just being clear about it, it makes total sense and are more on board and then being with it, being in there with them. And again, I think part of the conflicting part as being a human in all of this is letting go of the people and the things and the mindsets that are just completely out of your control, which, when I think back to some of my experiences within this arc of journey of fitness, even from the beginning working out because I was insecure and wanted to build more confidence and a frame that I was proud of. And then that morphed into getting in the shape for the military. And then that, morphed into something else. And then it morphed into being competitive within CrossFit. And, and it just kind of kept taking these evolutions. And, as that kind of has continued to progress, going back to some people are just going to want that thing that they want. And they're going to want to come in and they're going to want to work out more than is probably healthy for them. And it's another hard part as a coach is when they lose ability or are in pain and they simply will not do the necessary things, whatever that may be in terms of Does that mean rest? Does that mean getting the care and you need in other outlets? Does that mean transitioning service of like, hey, this large group melting pot model of general physical preparedness that's going to kind of hit a bunch of broad things and it's fun to work out with other people, but that's not going to solve this thing. But you just want to keep, going at it and doing it because of all the things. If you just pivoted over here, and that's even where I'm at right now. So like I relate to the challenge in that of having to get out of my own way, hire a coach, follow a program, get a Globo gym membership to help improve my range of motion because I don't have access to cables and such. And it's a means to an end. And it's hard. Like I
Yeah.
understand that part. Um, I also recognize as hard as it is, it's the way through because I've beat my head up against the wall enough to know. Um, so, I think going back to it, leading by example, communicating, having clear communication, you can't communicate enough. And that, like you're mentioning, like communicating with your people through internal and external blogs and in person. Um, and maybe even that means when I've thought about when I've written the programming, how can I make this fun yet still kind of in the line of what we're talking about of today is barbell and body weight free and it's going to move the needle conditioning wise. And that's actually an example for us today is something we have on tap. And you know, I'm going to go participate in that later. I can do that. And two, there's a layer of like the coach or our teams making that a fun experience to be a part of and exciting to be a part of. And how do we do that? And how do we get engagement out of that?
Yeah.
So it can run its depths. I would hope people who are under our care and whoever is watching this, if you're like, there's a time, and I would tell me if you agree, where you're not thinking about your necessary, I don't want to say like mortality, but like you kind of have this like invincibility mindset of your body and time. And at least I had that. Did you have that in your
Oh,
youth?
yeah, for sure.
Right. And then you transition, whether it's you become a parent, you age, or both of those things, or you go through experiences or injury, whatever it is, and just the nature of things change. So again, I think again, going back to the whole thing is finding the thing or things you like to do that you'll be consistent at doing and that will be good for me. And if I can't do it myself, I need to get help in doing that. Sustainability.
Oh,
And also like if it changes, it changes. I, as a gym owner, tell me if you agree, I used to have this naive belief like, man, everyone will be here with me forever. And
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
silly to say it out loud. And then when people would go for any reason, I would be so distraught. And again, the
Oh
commitment
my
of
gosh, yeah, you take it so personally.
helping for health, helping for just the journey we talk about of like you see people. So like you said, which I loved, doing something. Because the enemy is not CrossFit. The enemy's not the neighboring gym or tonal or whatever. The enemy is processed food, the couch, laziness, bad habits, and how do we commit ourselves to, and then we start to rot. We start to like lose our thinking. So,
Yeah,
um, you know,
yeah, yeah, for sure. The one thing I want to like before we move on from this, say in like a real championing the group training model is that your gym has a super strong community feel
Mm.
to it, where people find meaning and they find belonging and they find hope and acceptance and all these really beautiful, incredible things. And we really focus on that really heavy at our gym too, which I think is so helped by the group fitness model.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's so valuable. And so I don't want to, like, as we're having this conversation about like some of the deep dives into the finer points of like long-term training, like if you're somebody who's watching this or listening to this who loves group training, like that's because it's awesome and it's incredible. And I think, like you, for myself, I get caught up often in trying to talk about like the best possible ways to do something, forgetting what you just reminded us of, that like doing something is the thing. Doing
Yeah.
anything is better than doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it like the better than zero model. And
Yeah.
you can apply that
Yep.
anywhere in terms of eat one fruit versus no fruit, eat one
Yep.
vegetable versus no vegetable, do
Yep.
uh, a 30-second plank over doing nothing, you
We've got
know?
we send out every Monday, we send out an email called Bare Minimum Mondays, which is a coach. One of our coaches came up with that term or told me that term. And it's one thing to do for movement, one thing for nutrition, one thing for sleep, one thing for stress management.
Mhm.
And they're all like that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, tomorrow eat 30 grams of protein at breakfast. And then don't do it for the rest of the week if you want. Fine. But like do something, because action is so much better than anybody you follow, any book you read, anything you think about. Like actually taking action and doing something is the thing that's going to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Which area in health of we'll keep it to those: sleep, stress management, nutrition, and movement. Pick a category and tell me something particularly that you, a health and fitness professional, may struggle with at times. And how do you navigate that struggle?
Sleep is the biggest one for me. And the reason, so I am very lucky that sleep quality has pretty much always been high for me. Being able to fall asleep is something that I can do very easily. It's just like luck of the draw. Not everybody's like that. So I'm really lucky in that regard. But I coach the 6 a.m. class. I only do that 3 times a week anymore. I used to do it more than that. But in order to coach the 6 a.m. class, I really like to get up at 4 a.m. because I want to have time to get ready, to get to the gym, and then I want to do all the stuff I want to do to start my day.
Hmm.
Um, I want to breath work and meditation and work out and do stuff so that when the 6 a.m. folks roll in, like they're not getting a coach who's been awake for 7 minutes. Like they're getting somebody who's like here and present and engaged and ready to go. So I want to get up at 4 a.m. to be able to make all that stuff happen. However, my kids go to bed, they're usually in bed and we're out by 8 o'clock. So it's not crazy. What I would love from like a logistical standpoint would be for me to go to bed by like 8:30, and then
Hmm.
I have 7 hours of sleep and it's great.
Hmm.
However, generally speaking, like my wife and I are also doing things throughout the day. So when the kids go to bed, it's like we have time to connect,
Hmm.
where we're not talking about the kids, but like talking to each other like two adults. Going way back to one of your earlier questions, that's another key thing, is like being able to maintain a relationship that's the two of us, that's not as co-business owners, that's not as parents, but like as the two of us.
Hmm.
So we were on that, but like Lauren doesn't get up at 4 o'clock. She gets up at 7 o'clock. So she's not ready for bed at 8 o'clock or 8:30. So I stay up later with her, um, which I value and really care about. But then I usually end up going to bed in theory by 10, which would still be 6 hours. But in real life, it's often like 10:30. It's almost never 11, but then it ends up being like 5.5 hours of sleep. And that's not enough. And that only happens 3 days a week anymore. And almost always I like make it up with a nap during, like, if I have 5.5 hours of sleep last night, I'm going to take a 90-minute nap today. Just try to like close that gap a little bit and keep the sleep debt down. But
Hmm.
that's the hardest one for me. Stress management, I feel like I've got good tools in. Movement, eating, I feel like I've got good tools there, but sleep is the one. What is
Mm.
it for you?
Sleep jumps out in terms of it's just an awareness that I have of it's not sleeping through the night. I have a challenge with wanting to have a certain amount of time and space that I call like recharge, down regulating, mindless time. I think there's a large portion of our days. When I say hour, it's like small business owner coaching.
Yep.
Um, it's interesting. I think as there are so many things that I'll speak for myself are on my mind and that I am either attending to, I got to address this. And that's an area that I'd love to get better at in terms of my business, in terms of what am I working on today when I'm not there. And then if there is engagement, team, coaching, forward facing stuff, anything in terms of exchange, by the end of the day, there's been like the analogy of a phone. The phone started at 100%. It's the battery
Yeah.
is so I do not like there's something very charged in me of like not wanting to feel like a robot of like, cool, I've done that. Now go to bed and do it again and do it again and like not
Yep.
human. And so wanting to separate to a space of mindless entertainment, relax, like share quality time with my significant other who falls asleep like you, like that, where I'm not like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I will put myself sometimes into position of like, I won't allow myself to go to sleep. I should go to sleep 9 o'clock. Should go to sleep 9:30. And like, no, I'm gonna watch this episode of Survivor and then fall asleep on the couch. And you have to do that
Yeah.
broken sleep walk or like brush and then go. And then all of a sudden my mind's racing a little bit. And I'm like, okay, like gotta calm myself back down. And the earlier in the week that got really away from me. And it was like 2 days of it in a row that were bad. Excuse me, where I was like, tonight I am making a change. And I made such a
Yeah.
shift to that sleep. And man, what a difference mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally the next day. So, I brought that up because even as health and fitness professionals who are talking about these things and invested in these things at such high levels and do our research and have a plethora of experience and knowledge, there's still areas of
Right.
areas to work on, areas of struggle. And that's humility,
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Yep. And like one of the reasons I started doing the bare minimum Monday stuff is because we were in the middle of a move, which is just the worst. Like if anybody's moving, oh my gosh, it's so awful. Uh, but but like I was like, I'm not training this week. Like I'm packing boxes and I'm not eating this week. Like my whole kitchen's packed up. This is going to be a week of takeout. So it's like, okay, what what one thing can I do in
Hmm.
each of these areas? Like, can I put my phone down 20 minutes before I get into bed? No, that's too hard for me. Well, can I do it for 10 minutes? Like, yes, I can do it 10 minutes. And so just like little teeny tiny things, because yeah, I mean, we're all people.
Yeah. What's something interesting about you that I think to give to people is like you have this great ability. I think I think about how we met and I think about like not afraid to go first and to extend yourself. I think there's a lot of that nervousness in, putting yourself out there. What if I get, shut down or rejected or whatever? And not in our case, but in a place of putting yourself out there. Hey, like I remember when we met at a business summit and it was the last day and you and your wife had come up to me and we were talking about something and then we happened to be on the same flight home, right? Part of the
Yeah. Oh
same.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I forget how it got brought up, but then something of like, cool, let's chat. Let's jump on a Zoom and chat. And then you and I just continued to do that once a
Yeah.
month and have developed such a real beautiful friendship of depth. And I think about the humility to go first, to say, like, to put yourself out there, and just, to you had good intentions, and like from that, like something really special came, and we chat, once a month, and because
Yeah.
we're about an hour and a half away, and then you even came down to my gym,
Yep.
and
You
uh,
came back to my gym.
I visited your gym and you came to my gym, and not only did you come to my gym, but it was we did a skill session, and then you took a
Yep.
class, and I was like,
Yep.
cool, tell me like all, tell me your experience, tell me all the things, and we had such good reflection, and then I came and saw yours and spent time up there, and we went out to eat. Oh man, good stuff. So I love that
Yeah.
you did that, and I think that's such um a good reminder, not to be afraid to go first, and with your
Yeah.
humility,
Yeah, man.
Well, Michael, I know you have to, we want to be respectful of your time.
Appreciate it.
My last and only question for you:
Yeah.
when did you decide to start shaving your head?
When it was obvious that I wasn't going to have that many other options. It just went shorter and shorter and shorter.
I always kick off our Zooms, checking in on that beard. Is that a
I
just for
know.
men beard?
I know you ask me every
It's,
time.
it
And it
looks
gets like
so
it
so
gets
good.
this white patch gets whiter and whiter.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will love to have you on again in the future, because I know we
Yeah,
talked
man.
about male relationships with masculine and feminine,
Yep.
just the
Yep. I think we could talk about like going first and making friends as an adult. We could talk about that. We could talk about, you talked about like being responsible with your intention in conversation. That's a deep well. Like there's all kinds of good stuff, which is why we've been, doing conversations like this every month for what, a year and a half.
which are just endless of gems. So,
Indeed.
Michael, I want to thank you for your time, for all your shares, and I know that I and others, and hopefully you, gained a lot out of this conversation, and we can take what we need.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you.